Thanks.
And welcome again to this Exponential Race to the Top session on landing the exponential narrative. We keep being reminded of the urgency to act. For example, by leaders just this past week here in Bonn. We're heading for 2.7 degrees of global heating, Simon Steele said in his speech when he kicked off the Bonn Climate Change Conference. The entire carbon budget will be busted before 2030, is what the UN Secretary General said just a few days later. And indeed, carbon emissions were on the rise again in 2023 by 1.1% compared to 2022, something that Johan Rockström reminded us of earlier in this program. And at the same time, we see the impacts of climate change hitting us. We've talked about that, the floods in Brazil, devastating extreme heat wave in India, and examples are really all around us. So let's discuss where that leaves us on the exponential narrative. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Matthew Phillips and Jakob Beautemps, who's here joining us on the screen. Matthew, you lead a project that is called Groundswell, a collaborative project born, I want to quote here, from the belief that we must and we can shift the climate narrative. But why is that even important?
Thanks, Andrea. It's good to be here. I guess the reason we think it's of fundamental importance to change the climate narrative is because currently we're being hit on all sides by, I would say, broadsides of doom and despair. If you look at the mainstream press that we've analysed, we can see that 76% of articles would support what I would call a climate doomist narrative. I'm sure that Jakob would tell us how we're seeing a surge on social media that doesn't just have a doomist mindset, but also attacks solutions, attacks EVs, heat pumps, vegan diets. And what that's leading to is a sense of basically depression, that we can no longer do this, a sort of outright collective paralysis. And I would say until we can shift that narrative to a narrative that says it's going to be difficult, but we can still meet our collective climate goals, we're actually not going to be able to attain them. I think it was the car maker Henry Ford that said, whether you think you can or you can't, you're probably right. And it's important that we tell ourselves a story of we can, so indeed we can go and grab those climate goals with both hands.
And one of the ways that you seek to shift this narrative is through really showing the examples of where there is exponential growth of solutions. And Jakob, on your platform, in your Breaking Lab videos, you've also highlighted these examples of where we do have exponential growth of climate solutions, of renewable energies, where we are approaching these positive tipping points on the S-curve, on the exponential curve, so where we get to the point where it's not painful anymore, where the solutions are just taking off. So you covered this in your videos, and I would like to find out a little bit about why. So what gets you excited about covering the exponential growth of climate solutions, the exponential narrative?
I mean, you already explained that one of the big problems is that we always hear bad news, and people are kind of sick of hearing bad news. And I think one of the main issues, if you're talking about sustainability, is that you are talking about a topic that everybody says it's a very, very important topic. It might be even the most important topic of our time. But the problem is that many people also don't want to hear about it anymore, because everything they hear for a long time now is bad news, and is like this blame game, who to blame for what went wrong. And that's not how you get the people. And that's one of the reasons why I really like these stories, where you can see, okay, we are doing something, and we are here, we have positive news. And actually there's a very nice story about the video I did I did an interview with Nigel Topping about this exponential growth, and we made a video out of it that said, "Oh, we're further than we are expected to be." And like 1 week later, I was walking on the street in Cologne where I live, and an older person, usually it's not my main audience, uh, he screamed to me and said, "Hey, I just want to thank you because you made my week because of this video." And he explained that he saw this video and he was so positive about it that he said, I made his week. And I think seeing these reactions, you can imagine that people are so hungry for these good stories. And that's why I love to tell them.
But then again, understanding exponential growth, it seems, is not necessarily intuitive to people, right? We expect things to move linear. We expect things to be incremental, and maybe we're also slightly scared about exponentials. What challenges maybe are there then in storytelling for you when you do these kind of videos?
I mean, there are different rules that I follow to get people excited about this topic. The first thing I always start with is you need a good hook. And especially when you're talking about sustainability, you need a good hook to catch the people so they listen to the information. And I can tell you, if you say, "Oh, I have this new video about CO2," this is not a good hook. People don't want to see this. So you need to think about, okay, what could be a smart way to get people into watching this. And then the other thing is, like you already said, I mean, exponential growth is one thing, but also we people, we are not so good with numbers. So you always have to think, okay, how can I explain it in a way that people can relate to it and understand what I tell them? And this, there are two things that really help. First of all, you can see what examples can you find in the everyday life of the people. So you can compare, for example, amounts of water with bathtubs, of course. But if you're talking about CO2, it's not that easy anymore. So you have to see how can you compare an amount of CO2 in tons to what people can relate to. And that might be 100-kilometer drive with a car, or maybe what you exhaust in a year or so. So this is the first thing, and the other thing is that you have to make it visual, because CO2, again, you can't see it. So you have to see how can I make this visible? And this is the same for every topic for exponential growth. Also, when we did this video, we made visualizations to show the people, okay, what does it really mean? And we gave them examples out of our everyday life where you can see, okay, what impact does this have on me? For example, if we are talking about how expensive is electricity and how nice it is if solar power, for example, gets cheaper and cheaper.
Now you're a partner to in the Groundswell project, and Matthew. So you in this project you work with the with this audience, right? With the audience on YouTube, but at the same time, the exponential narrative also really needs to land with decision makers and fairly soon, ideally. So what do you do to do that, to succeed with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we need the exponential mindset to land with everyone. I mean, Jakob is bang on, I think, when he says we need to focus on people's lived experiences. What makes this abstract thing relatable? We know that 80% of citizens feel completely alienated by climate and nature messaging. So if we are not meeting audiences where they're at, how can we expect them to be converted from a linear to an exponential mindset? I think citizens, clearly the types of citizens and ordinary people that Jakob is speaking to, is a key audience for government decision makers. Who do governments listen to? They listen to their voters. So making sure that we're directly speaking to the grassroots is incredibly important. We also need to speak to that great fourth establishment, the media, the press, because they actually do so much, even in these modern times, to actually inform what the climate and the political and the economic conversation looks like. And a final thing that I think we need to do is just open up a conversation with decision makers and governments themselves. We hear in these climate conferences so much that governments just aren't hearing from businesses, from citizens as much as they need to. So how can we as connectors better kind of open up that dialogue, that conversation, so everyone is hearing what they need to in a way that makes sense to them and resonates with them?
Why is that such an important message to land now?
Well, we are, I would say, at a moment of extreme jeopardy in terms of the climate politics. We are in a moment where governments are required under the Paris Agreement to come back to the table with their updated national climate plans. The current national climate plans, as we heard in the previous session, are no way near where we need to get to in terms of a 1.5 degree limit, which is a sort of safe temperature goal for the world. So how do we get those national climate plans in line with 1.5? And the answer is we enter into a really open dialogue with citizens, with businesses, with youth, with investors on the possibility that governments have if they are to heighten their ambition. So it's very important they hear that right now, and then they resubmit these national climate plans with that heightened ambition incorporated within them. And we've got about 12 months to do that.
And as we look towards COP29 at the end of this year and then COP30 next year, Jakob, what is your wish? So what should come true for climate comms, if you want to call it that, communication on climate change on this exponential narrative? So for climate communication to be more effective, what needs to come true?
That's a very good question. I think it's hard to say there's one answer on it. I think there are different things we have to do. We have to get more professional, I think. This is important for us. So, because it's such an important topic, we can't just, yeah, like go in there and spontaneously see what we can do. And actually, you said before that I partnered with Groundswell. Actually, I didn't. It was like totally random. I was in Detroit on an event with Ted, and then I was at COP, and it was random that I met these researchers there, and we did videos together. And seems to be like both of them were supported by Groundswell, but actually we never planned this. And I think what I wish is that we get more focused, that we work together as partners, because I think one important thing is like if you want to save the planet, save the climate, it's hard to do this like on the side. There are people that are working full time to destroy it. So it's important that we have people that also work full time to save it. And I think therefore it's important that we get more professional, that we work together, collaborate, and I think that would be my wish for the future, that there's more teamwork and more different players working together for the big vision.
Thank you, Jakob. Matthew, in a year from now, so just 1 year from now, when hopefully we will have seen countries that have submitted national climate action plans that are more ambitious, and as we approach COP30 then, how will we know we've been successful in landing the exponential narrative?
Well, I think the key thing is what you're already hinting at, Andrea, which is that we have plans that are in line with that 1.5 scenario. If we can be in Belém in Brazil for those COP30 negotiations and all of the plans submitted ladder us up to that target, I think we can really be very proud of ourselves as a society. I think the other thing to be really clear about is that those plans need to include specific sectoral policies on what is required from businesses and investors. So these aren't just like far away or abstract targets. We're really getting into granular detail so that we can create an ambition loop between government actors, but also businesses, cities, regions, and investors. And when that is taken forward from Brazil, then we might just meet the Paris targets that we need to by 2030.
Are you, just really short last question here, are you starting to see that, let's say, co-ownership of society, of the private sector with the national governments in delivering that ambition?
Well, we've talked a lot on this session about exponential, and the exponential curve is one that starts like this, and then it suddenly goes up very, very steeply. And I think what we're seeing in terms of this conversation towards 1.5 alignment is we're in the foothills of that curve. But I really hope and think that in the next 12 months we can send that into a much steeper curve. So let's make it happen.
And Jakob is doing his bit to achieve that. Thank you so much, Jakob Beautemps, YouTuber, science researcher. Thank you, Matthew Phillips, project lead at Groundswell. And that ends this Exponential Race to the Top session on landing the exponential narrative. Katharina will be up in just a second. Thanks for joining us.